Welcome back to Royals Weekly. I am your host, Marcus Mead, and joining me as always, a man in desperate need of some chicken noodle soup. Help him out, people. My brother
I
Mike.
need something stronger than chicken noodle soup. Maybe Grandpa's old cough medicine. How's that sound? I am afflicted with a head cold this week, so I apologize for the raspiness of my voice. If you hear a sneeze in the background, that's me. For those of you watching on YouTube, I have a tissue in my hand because my eyes water uncontrollably for some reason with this illness. I don't know.
Mostly because it
But
makes him sad, but
yeah,
other than that,
I'm just so emotional about the 3-0 Kansas City Royals in the Arizona League. It really gets
the
me.
Cactus League gets you, yeah.
Or Cactus League.
That's how dedicated Mike is to the Weekly Weirdos. He's showing up. He's playing sick. This is like the fourth or fifth time he's done this. Mike gets sick a lot, and so
I have a toddler.
Well, and Mike's just filthy, and so he gets sick all the time. But thank you so much, Mike, for coming and toughing one out for us. I know the Weekly Weirdos appreciate it. On this week's episode, we're going to spend the entire episode discussing the very limited information we have so far about the Royals' 2025 team. We have a little bit of baseball to talk about with spring training, so that's what we're going to talk about. I'm tired of talking about stuff that's not actual baseball, and so we're going to talk about actual baseball, however limited it is. So we'll dedicate some time to the offense, we'll dedicate some time to the pitching, and then we'll do a little bit of talk about outside baseball stuff like we normally do. But this is also a reminder to subscribe to our Substack. I also forgot to put something else in here that needs to be in here. So, Mike, why don't you tell the audience why they should subscribe to our Substack real quick?
So much awesome stuff. You're going to get an extra episode a week. You're going to get at least one piece of written content a week, more as the summer goes along. Also, just to put it out there, you might be getting an extra episode from me every week starting soon. Once the games get rolling, I'm going to try and do some extra solo episodes for our Substack subscribers. Plus, it's just dirt cheap. It's dirt cheap content, people. $5 a month, and you get all that extra stuff and some really deep analytical stuff from Mark every week. If you're into that sort of stuff, it'll be a little bit more lighthearted and fun stuff from me on the extra episode that we start doing here once real games get rolling. And that's where where the heartbeat of Royals Weekly lies now, is in that Substack, and we really enjoy creating that content. So go get signed up or give it as a gift to somebody or whatever.
Yes, thank you for vamping there for a minute, Mike, because I forgot that I needed to read this Bet
It's really the only
Online
thing I'm
copy.
good at.
Yes.
I'll
got
talk.
some new Bet Online copy. We got to remind you that Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA to college basketball to the NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every single game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. Mike, I want to start broadly before we get into the hitter specifically and the pitcher specifically. Let's talk broadly a little bit about this first 3 games of spring training. What are you thinking about in terms of what you've seen from the Royals so far broadly?
3-0, baby.
3-0, baby. Undefeated. Cactus League undefeated
in the
champs.
Cactus League. No, first place in the Cactus League.
Hang the banner.
No, it's cool to win, I guess. It's better than losing, as Nuclear Lush would say. But no, it's been cool. We did get to see that one game in the Dodgers against the Dodgers as well, so we've gotten to watch one of those. It's just been fun to see real, kind of semi-real baseball again, which I've been good. And I one of the biggest questions, and we're going to talk about this in a second, that we've kind of had that 5th starter spot. We've already gotten some data on that, and it's been positive. And so I've been really happy with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think from what we've seen and from what you can hear in the gameplay and all that sort of thing, I think it's seemed like fairly clean baseball from the Royals to start. I mean, you're not seeing a bunch of the typical mistakes. We watched that Dodgers game and they were kicking the ball around a little bit. The Dodgers weren't playing super clean baseball in that game. But the Royals are out there. They look like they were playing pretty clean. The pitching staff is throwing a ton of strikes. In game 1, I think they had something like a 70 to 75% strike rate among every pitcher that they had. It was incredible. In game 2, they drew 11 walks as a team offensively, which you love to see from the Royals. We're just seeing, I think, as a whole, some really good baseball being played, which is interesting because spring training is kind of known for here's where you work the kinks out. It's not always going to be super smooth, but so far it's been a fairly clean 3 games for the Royals, and I'll take that all day long.
And we haven't, other than the shoulder thing for Alec Marsh, he had already coming in. Kyle Wright's hamstring. We haven't had any major injuries, which is obviously maybe the most important thing.
Right, none to the
Oh, the
major league
hamate
team.
bone. I
There was
forgot
the
about the
hamate
hamate
bone.
bone.
We
Yeah.
will we'll sort of talk about that. We're not doing our typical sort of roster news section and all that sort of stuff because we're not in the regular season. But it was announced, I think, yesterday that Royals top catching prospect Blake Mitchell has a broken hamate bone, and as a result, will be down for 4 to 6 weeks, which will of course mean he won't start the year off on time. He was probably going to high A, I imagine. And so tough to hear that for him. Hamate bone is a tough injury sometimes, can sap you of a little bit of your power. And we know power is kind of his calling card. You got to hope that he recovers completely from that and can still put a charge into the baseball.
Yeah, it's his right hand, his throwing hand, and his lead hand when he's hitting. And so um, that's tough. You don't love to see that.
We're starting our discussion today of how the Royals have played so far with the Royals hitters. I feel like that conversation is the one that most people are most interested in, given the struggles of the lineup to end last year. The Royals have only played 3 games, so obviously everything we say is taken with an enormous grain of salt. But we're already seeing some guys stand out as worthy of discussion at the very least. Mike, who has stood out to you so far among these Royals hitters?
Well, the two that I'm going to talk about that have a chance of playing in Major League Baseball this year are Tyler Gentry. Has had a very good start to spring training. He had 2 hits in one game. He had a home run in another game, 3 RBI, I think that game. Um,
Stole a
he's
base.
doing it. Yeah, Tyler Gentry's looked really good, which then sparks my mind of, I had somewhat written him off. He's your boy, but we haven't seen him do anything at the major league level, and we've even seen him at times scuffle at the AAA level. And so I've kind of written him off, wondering if he'll ever hit the ball hard enough consistently to play Major League Baseball. But I haven't seen the numbers on those exit velocities or anything like that. But Tyler Gentry, hats
I
off, he's done
have
very well.
seen those numbers, and you know who all has also seen those numbers are our Substack subscribers because I wrote about him for today's Substack post. He had the exit velocity on his home run was like 104 plus, somewhere in there, and
Yeah.
then he had a line drive single, I believe, that was 106 plus,
Okay,
and so
that's
he's
a
got a
good
couple of
sign.
decent exit velocities. Yeah,
That's a good sign. So Tyler Gentry throwing his name in the ring for maybe one of them corner outfield spots. Another guy who might be pulling his hat right out of the ring is MJ Melendez. We got to watch him. It was really weird because it looked like, some of these were decent at bats in that Dodgers game, especially. And because he got up 3-0, I think in all 3 at bats or 2 of the 3 at bats that he got up 3-0. He struck out in 2 of those 3 at bats and he walked in the other one. Okay. And that first strikeout looked like vintage MJ Melendez. It was a 93-mile-an-hour fastball at his letters and swung right through the thing, right underneath it. And so, yeah, you can see that the swing is different. You can see that it looks more simplified. Haven't seen anything like a result for it yet, though. So that's not been great. And then the other big news from today, did you mention Carter Jensen? I thought you mentioned Carter Jensen's home run.
I will mention it later. Yes.
Okay. Carter Jensen had home run, but I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about Jackie Cags, baby. He also went deep today. Did you see the exit velocity on that bad boy?
Yeah, 115.
114.9 or something. They rounded it up, but still 114 is insane. So good to see the promise of Jac Caglianone. He has struck out a couple times and done some vintage Caglianone stuff, but that bomb is also vintage him.
Yes, it was fun to see at the very least. I'm going to mention a hitter who doesn't have any hits, but I have liked what I've seen from his plate appearances, and that's Joey Weimer. He does have 2 walks, which is great. I mean, if you're a guy who's going to be a rotational outfield player, all you need to do is get on base, right? And of course, he has a big towering swing. If you've ever seen Joey Weimer, if you got a chance to watch that Dodgers game, he's a big dude. He's a big dude with a lot of strength. He doesn't make great contact all the time. He doesn't make contact all the time, but it was nice to see him out there draw a couple walks, have a couple of good plate appearances. That gives me some hope that maybe he could be that rotational piece. Of course, Gentry has looked good, so I mentioned him in here too. I think Nick Lofton has looked probably the best of all the hitters, but we're going to talk about him here in a second. I also think we've seen some good things from other guys who are sort of on the margins of the roster. Will they, won't they make it? Kevin Biggio, I think, has looked okay in his plate appearances. Harold Castro has looked good in some of his plate appearances. And so we've seen things. To me, there's a narrative that like the guys who knew they were on the bubble have come ready to play and perform from day one because they know that spring training isn't just getting ready for them. They have to like show out if they even want a chance to make this roster coming out of spring training. And, still not great chances for Gentry or Lofton or Castro probably, but they improve if somebody goes down or if something happens. It's more likely you're going to make the club if you put out a decent performance in spring training. Mike, I just mentioned Lofton. We've seen him come up with a few hits. I think he's like 3 for 4 at this point with a walk or two. He's actually been on base 4 or of the 5 trips he's been to the plate, and he's putting the ball in play pretty hard. What are your thoughts on Lofton so far?
Well, I haven't got to see him really go yet because the only game we've been able to watch is that Dodgers
He did
game.
get into that game late in the game.
That?
Yes,
okay,
he subbed into that game.
But it's encouraging, obviously. But what I want to know, I want more information. I did get to see a couple of those hits in like clips. One of them was a kind of a pretty good shot ground ball up the middle. I think he hit a line drive too, and both of those had pretty decent exit velocities. But my thing is he going to consistently get the ball in the air? That's been his thing. And the other thing with him is this: if he doesn't, he's in big trouble because he swings a lot, and he's a big contact guy, bat to ball guy. And the thing about those guys is if their launch angle gets off even a little bit, and they're just pounding the ball on the ground, you go into massively long slumps. Now, his role is likely to be a utility player anyway, so I don't know if he's going to be able to get in massively long slumps because he'll be pulled out in a day or two anyway. But I also don't want a guy who, for half the season, goes 3 or 4 weeks and doesn't have a hit because he couldn't, lay off pitches and swings at everything. So that's I need to make sure that he's hitting that ball in the air, hitting line drives, optimal launch angle for Nick Lofton. Would love to just see him take a few more pitches too. Would be great, but that's maybe not the hitter he is.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job sort of showing a lot of line drives out there, and he has been hitting the ball significantly harder. You remember my critique of him last year was that it looked like he just was not putting the ball in play hard. And I thought like, oh, maybe it's an issue. He's not actually squaring the ball up on the barrel. We did hear some reports that he had off-season shoulder surgery, so it could have been an injury-related thing, or maybe he just was having trouble finding the barrel. Maybe that's actually the case. He will always struggle to produce any kind of like top end exit velocities. He can't do that. He's not Jac Caglianone. He's not Carter Jensen. He's not, he's a 105 guy at most.
Max.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, he's going to have to be a guy who lives in 95 to 105 miles per hour as an exit velocity. And he's going to have to do it a lot. And he's going to have to do it with a line drive sort of approach. It could work for him as a utility player, but he also has to be patient enough to take those walks when they're given to him. It was nice to see that he's taken one of those so far. He's done a good job being in control of plate appearances. He, to me, has been the most impressive position player out there for the Royals up to this point. And so it's interesting to see that. Does that mean he's going to get a job out of spring training? Not necessarily. I believe he has options left, and so that's going to work against him. But if he shows the Royals, hey, I can be counted on. I'm a guy who can be your 26th, 25th guy. And then, Kevin Biggio doesn't work out or he gets hurt or something like that. They might feel better about going to him in a month or two after the season starts than they would otherwise. Today, Carter Jensen, you mentioned him, Mike, hit an absolute nuke to right field while picking up right where he left off from the Arizona Fall League, where you remember he had an OPS over 1,300. How do you think the Royals will handle him? We saw him start the game catching today and batting 8th or 9th. How do you think the Royals are going to handle him, especially with the consideration of if he's really hot in AA, AAA, do you keep him down? Like he can't come up and catch. Like that's not going to happen. So what do you do with Carter Jensen?
I think that you still try and play him some in the outfield quite a bit, because not that you don't let him catch at all, have him catch too, keep those catching skills developing and getting used to the level of pitching that he's on, because he'll hopefully get moved up to AAA at some point. I don't assume that he'll start in AAA. I think he's probably going to start in AA, but I think if he plays like we've seen him play in Arizona and last year, and now with this, promising start to spring training, I think you move him pretty quickly up to AAA, and you're having him do both. Get him some work in a corner outfield, get him behind the plate once or twice a week, make sure that he's still doing, keeping up with that sort of stuff and getting used to AAA pitching and all that. And then when you need him, maybe, probably not this year, maybe next year or whatever, you bring him up. You know, and maybe that's when maybe it's next year and Salvi's decided to call it a thing. Maybe Freddie Fermin is into arbitration and you don't want to pay him because he plays a little bit more than a normal catcher does or whatever, you know, and you trade him or there's going to be options, or heck, you might need a right fielder. You know, you might need a right fielder and Salvi's getting old. You put him in right field and then, oh, Salvi gets hurt. Well, now he's catching more. You bring somebody up to play right field. It gives you some flexibility if he can play multiple positions. And so that's my hope to see for him. I want to see him in AAA by the end of the year and having some experience in a corner outfield too.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, that's tough because catchers have to spend so much time preparing and doing things that are focused on catching. And so it's tough to ask somebody to like take on those catching defensive responsibilities, but also be ready to learn a new position in left or right field. That's a tough sort of thing to ask. You can do it if you come up with a plan that's effective and that will work. The Royals also, and every team does, have the DH position to sort of think about as a potential way to fold him in at some point, right? Even if he does just keep catching, and you're like, we're really just waiting for Salvador Perez to retire, and then Carter Jensen will take over behind the plate for the Royals as the primary catcher. Maybe Fermin sticks around as the backup, or by then Luca Tresh is your backup or something like that. But with his bat and what the potential for his bat looks like, he's going to be a guy who's in the lineup every single day. The question is, where's he going to be? And I think if you're thinking it might be the outfield, then you really have to start getting him some experience out there. He is only 21, 22 years old. He's still really young. And so I think Double A is where he's going to start because they don't want to rush him, because they don't want to, they're going to lean back on the fact that he is still a very young player. But what we've seen in the Arizona Fall League and now in spring training, he doesn't look out of place or anything facing major league pitching. And so, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of spring training goes. But if he keeps playing really well, they might have to come up with a plan that is more oriented to Carter Jensen in the major leagues by the end of this year or the beginning of next year than one that sees him in the major leagues in 2026 and beyond. Mike, coming into spring training, most of the concern that we had, and I think everyone had, was with the outfield and how it would perform offensively. Do you see any insight or take any insight away from these 3 games about the outfield offensively?
Well, now I'm wondering if Tyler Gentry or Nick Lofton aren't going to be options, or at least rotational options in the outfield there. You know, now Jonathan India did misplay a ball today, one of those Arizona sun balls. You know, kind of lost it in the sun. But that's not uncommon for one, a guy who's now learning the outfield, and two, it's Arizona. There are no clouds. It's just the sun.
He also made an excellent play running in today. I think Jake Eisenberg did a good job communicating it on the broadcast, but he ran a long way to get a ball in like a short pop up, and so let's give him some credit for that one. It is tough to lose a ball in the sun like that, but he has done
and that's kind of what you want to see. If you haven't had a chance, go read Ann Rogers' kind of little report today that she did from spring training. She mentions that, talking to India, he's like, the biggest thing for me is going to be that first step. First step, whether it's going out or in, you've got a huge outfield in Kaufman, and you got to be able to cover that ground with good routes, and that starts with your first step. And so she mentioned, oftentimes as an infielder you're coming in, as an outfielder you want to go out, stuff like that. But if he's adequate out there, great. But I'm now Tyler Gentry, he'll break your heart. He makes you want to believe. And right now I want to believe in Tyler Gentry and his ability to take at bats away from Hunter Renfroe.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. And that's the thing. Like Gentry, I like Gentry. He is my boy, but like I'm also realistic that it's a pretty tight needle for him to thread as like somebody who doesn't have even 55 grade raw power. He's got what I would consider major league average raw power. And so he's going to have to have really good plate appearances, not strike out a ton, and find that proper launch angle. And it hasn't always worked out. And we actually haven't seen it work out at all in the major leagues. And we've only seen it work sporadically in the minor leagues. Sorry, my ear itched right there. Yeah, I think it's interesting that they don't have options. It's weird because you think of Gentry, you think of Lofton and stuff like that, India, Melendez, Renfroe, Weimer, they don't have options anybody feels really good about, but they have a lot of options, right? Kind of reminds you of that old story, Mike. You remember that old thing? It's
Oh
like you
yeah,
got two kinds
got
of bad or two kinds of
two kinds of
news, good and
news, good and
bad.
bad.
You know, all we have to eat is horse shit, but we've got plenty of it. You know, it's not great.
Yeah.
And so now here's the thing. That's not calling them all horseshit. That's just that's just what makes me think of that joke. It might work solving this problem with quantity, right? Like maybe one of these guys pops, maybe Nick Lofton, or maybe Tyler Gentry, or maybe Joey Weimer, or maybe Hunter Renfroe or MJ Melendez can put up a league average season offensively. If they can do that, that will be enough to get them through, as long as Indy is putting up a 115, as long as maybe Isbell does a little bit better, and they're off and their infield plays as well as it did last year, right? Like if they get that, they're fine. And maybe they're essentially throwing 7 guys in the outfield and saying, like, one of you hit enough to play in the corner outfields. You know, like, one of you, please.
Yeah, that, and if you could find a good kind of rotation for that, that's awesome. The crappy thing is when you want a guy in there that's a rotational guy, a lot of times you'd prefer he play better defense than any of these guys do outside of maybe Weimer.
Gentry's not a bad right fielder.
He's not a
he's
great
not
right fielder either.
He's not great.
You know.
He's not great, but I think a slightly above average right fielder Tyler Gentry is. And I think Nick Lofton could be a slightly above average fielder, maybe. We all know that for most of part, spring training is for the pitchers. There's like a saying out there that should be like, spring training is for the pitchers. Getting them ramped up and ready to go is the primary goal of every team, and keeping them free from injury. The Royals are hoping to recreate the success of their rotation and improve the effectiveness of their bullpen this season. Mike, what stood out to you about the pitching staff so far?
Well, the 3 guys competing for the 5th starter spot have all looked really good so far. You know, I say the 3 guys, 3 of the guys that are competing. Alec Marsh is down right now. Kyle Wright is down right now. But Cameron, Bubic, and Lynch have all looked good in their time. You know, Bubic gave up a run, but that was off that Jonathan India misplay in the outfield. He looked very good. Lynch looked really good. You know, that was good to see. Some talk of perhaps an increased use of his cutter, which I think did I read from our guy David Lesky? He threw it like literally 3 times last year at the end of the year, and that was it. And so like he showing that a little bit more, and that being successful. And then friend of the show, Noah Cameron, came out firing BBs this week, and that was good to see. He threw, what'd they say? He threw 13. It only took him 13 pitches to get through 2 innings, and 11 of them were strikes in the 2 innings he pitched so far. That is Noah Cameron. He throws strikes. And, you know, the changeup looked good as well. So, yeah, I'm excited to see those 3 battle it out. I think, you know, Champlain was hit or miss in the Dodgers game. At times he looked good. He first batter of the game, he kind of made look silly. You know, I don't know. I think was a really good changeup. I couldn't really tell what it was because of the weird angle, but yeah, he's still something I think to dream on. He needs some work. He got a little out of sorts there for a second, but that was good to see. The other interesting thing, and I wanted to bring this up because I didn't know if you'd seen it. Ann Rogers in that piece that I told you about, which you haven't seen at MLB.com. It's great. She does a great job. She mentioned that, and I think I saw this somewhere else. She mentioned that the Royals now see Jonathan Bolin as a reliever. Okay. Yeah. And so they're going to be throwing him in relief. And I'm going, I kind of like that. And then I think she threw some numbers in there. He came out of the pen, not quite as much as he started last year, but quite a bit. And he had an ERA of like 2.7 out of the pen and over 5 starting. And they saw an uptick in velocity when he was coming out of the pen too. So I like that for Jonathan Bolin. That excites me about the pitchers as well, but nothing to stack up. I really hope we get to see live a Noah Cameron start in spring training. That's really what I want to see. So, you know, pray to Zorp that we get it.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I would love to see. I've obviously watched a ton of his minor league stuff, but to see him against major league hitters, I think would be something even more cool to see. I'm loving seeing obviously some of the same guys that you said mentioned. Cameron, I think is great. I'm overall from the pitchers though. I love that we're seeing some improved velocity from some of these guys. So Noah Cameron was one of them in his first start. Came out sitting 93 to 95 with his fastball. Chris Bubic came out averaging a roughly 95 with his fastball. Like we're seeing some guys throwing a little bit harder And then as a whole, we're seeing the pitching staff come out and just pound the strike zone over and over and over again. And when you have a pitching staff that is so confident in its stuff that it can just throw strikes over and over and over again, that's where you want your pitching staff to be, because one, you're not giving up free bases, which is huge, but two, these guys are confident enough in their own stuff to live in the strike zone, and they're still getting swing and miss and they're still getting strikeouts, but they're also pounding the zone, and it's really great to see. I think they obviously in spring training all the time emphasize strike throwing and that sort of thing, but clearly this pitching staff is sort of thinking from the same brain, if that makes sense. They're all wanting to sort of take a particular approach, and that's a philosophy being worked out by Brian Sweeney and the rest of this pitching staff and the rest of this, or pitching coaching staff and the pitching player development. Throw strikes, get ahead 1-0 and that sort of thing, or 0-1, and it's great to see them out there sort of executing that vision as an entire group. It makes you feel good about what their pitching development is.
Yeah, very exciting. And they're all left-handed and it all kind of looks good. And it makes you kind of dream because that's 7 guys. You know, if all 3 of them, including the 4 starters that they have in front of them, that's 7 guys. And you're going to need at least 7 at some point this season. So that's exciting. I wanted to ask you a question real quick because I'd kind of written off Daniel Lynch, honestly, as a starter again. I just, my belief in him wasn't necessarily there. Let's say, I think you and I both think it's Bubic's job to lose. Okay. Because Noah Cameron is still young, has options, hasn't pitched in AAA much. I think Bubic has a little bit more of a successful track record than Lynch does, so I think they would give it to him if both guys were good. What do you do with Daniel Lynch then?
You put him in the bullpen, and
do you put him in the bullpen, or do you send him back to Omaha to start?
Oh, I don't send him back to Omaha to start. I put him in the bullpen, and I say, we're going to keep you stretched to some degree. You're going to be like a swing man. If we need you to sort of go out and throw 3 or 4 innings out of the bullpen, you'll do that. And if we need you to spot start, you're going to spot start. I think the kid gloves are off Daniel Lynch now, and they're like, hey, whatever we need you to do, we're going to have you do, because you're not in that phase of your career where you're precious prospect status. We need you to go out and actually get people out. And so I think they feel pretty confident about him as a reliever. I think they're happy that he's added the cutter. What did we ask him to do 4 years ago, Mike? I have a YouTube video
either improve the fastball or add a cutter.
I have a YouTube video specifically about this. And so now that he's finally done it and it looks like maybe his stuff is a little bit better, I think they feel better about the notion that he might have to start. But if he doesn't, then you have a weapon in the bullpen who you feel better about and who you feel happy with. Because honestly, if he has to come in and spot start, you don't feel bad about that. He's had stretches of success starting. I think they feel okay about the notion of Daniel Lynch going out and giving them 5 innings and keeping them in a ball game. I think that's okay. And so, no, I don't send him back to Omaha at all. I will say that I'm also a huge fan of what Noah Cameron's done, and I'm probably his biggest fan outside the Cameron family. I love that he generated so many ground balls during his outing. So it only took him 11 or 13 pitches, I think, for his entire outing. He got 1 strikeout on a curveball. I think 3 guys put balls in play, all of them on the ground. He got one of them was a base hit, but then he got a double play, or maybe 4 of them were ground balls. I don't know. He generated a ton of ground balls. He did give up a couple of hard hit balls, which is okay, that's going to happen, but at least they were ground balls. If somebody's going to hit it hard, you want them to hit it in the ground because it's still pretty easy to field at that point. And so great to see from him. That was a huge boost. Of course, Bubic looked good. If not for the dropped India fly ball in the sun, he wouldn't have given up any runs. Lynch didn't give up any runs. So really it was kind of 3 clean outings from them. And that's what you want to see, because no matter if only one of them gets that 5th starter spot, all of them are going to pitch in the major leagues this year. And so you want them to be ready to come in and do well when they get here. Let's talk a little bit about relievers. Mike, have you taken note of any of the performance of any of the relievers so far?
The Dodgers game, the one I've actually watched, I didn't really take note of any of the guys there that I especially was like, oh, that's good. The thing I saw was in a box score, and that was Steven Cruz had a clean inning. And that he intrigues me maybe the most of guys that are like, hey, there's real potential here. We've seen it in small bits. We actually liked him when he was in Major League Baseball last year. They just didn't put him up there that much because after the trade deadline, it was actually kind of a stacked bullpen. You had a lot of guys you really liked. And so I'll be watching Steven Cruz. And then I already mentioned Jonathan Bolin will be the other guy in the bullpen that I'm watching for this year. I've been a big Bolin fan since before the Tommy John, so I'm not dropping my boy now that they may have put him in his best role. And so hopefully looking for some good stuff out of him. I don't think either one of those guys probably makes the pen out of spring training, but they're going to need other guys too. And so maybe both of those guys have pitched in Major League Baseball before. So maybe those are guys you go down and get.
Yeah, I really am intrigued by Steven Cruz and Bolin as well, honestly. I think having those guys in reserve is going to make this a deep pen, and having a deep pen is something you really, really want, especially for a team like the Royals, which, they've spent some money on some big time relievers with Estevez, and, even Hunter Harvey is a little bit expensive because I believe he's into arbitration years and stuff like that. But if you have the depth of like, okay, when one of our relievers goes down, we're going to go down and get a Steven Cruz who can come out throwing 98 mile an hour fastballs, 96 mile an hour cutters and sliders. And then we can go get Bolin, who's got a killer slider and a real heavy sinker and, all that sort of stuff. You feel so much better about the notion
I don't know that he throws the sinker all that much anymore.
He doesn't throw it all that, but even his fastball, it has some pretty
pen,
interesting movement. And so I want to see what Bolin can do in that role as well. I'll be interested to see I'm guessing they will. If they see him as a reliever now, just keep him in the bullpen in AAA, and let's see what that looks like in one inning stints. I think that's potentially interesting. I think that Angel Zerpa has looked good out of the pen so far. I thought Schreiber looked really good out of the pen against the Dodgers yesterday, and so that was good to see. I thought he looked pretty good.
Carlos Hernandez didn't.
Carlos Hernandez did not look good. And it was a hitter-friendly day, right? Remember we're talking about Arizona. We're talking about there are going to be some 11 to 10 games out there. Like this is the easiest place in the world outside of Colorado to hit. And so, you're going to see some guys get hit. But I thought Schreiber looked pretty good. And I think Zerpa's looked good in his one outing so far too. So hopefully we see a lot of guys continue to progress and throw strikes and get guys out. Royals Weekly is brought to you by All In Physical Therapy. You already know that All In Physical Therapy gave our mother the traps of Andre the Giant. But what you don't know is that Mom loved her experience there because of the personal attention she got from Tommy and the staff at All In. They guarantee a personalized one-on-one experience to suit the needs of patients recovering from total joint surgeries, sports injuries, or any kind of injury or pain.
I got pain in my brain and my nose and my lungs. A lot in the lungs, especially if I move upstairs.
Yeah, at this point, yeah. All In Physical Therapy is owned and operated by Tommy Fever with locations in Blue Springs, Lee Summit, and Belton. But most importantly, they're in-network for nearly all insurance providers.
In-network is essential, like breathing, which I currently cannot do after walking upstairs.
Yeah. If you're a high school athlete recovering from injury or someone bouncing back with a brand new hip or knee, check out the best physical therapy in the KC Metro at allin-pt.com. That's ALLIN-pt.com, or give them a call at 816-427-5300. That's 816-427-5300. We'll end this week's episode like we end every episode with the Just a Bit Outside segment where we talk to each other about something that's going on outside the world of baseball. Mike, you're not feeling great, but I know you got exciting things going on in your life. Tell me about what happened to you this last week or so.
Well, gotta give a shout out to my son's 3rd birthday today. Hi-yo.
Happy birthday, Lincoln. Yeah, did you tell him happy birthday for me? I told you to tell him.
I did. I still have to tell him for you. No, I already did it for you. I got to tell him for our older brother, BJ. He texted me right before the show. Got to tell him for that. So, but no, I've been, he's been getting all the happy birthday stuff. Got to help make his own cake, which he loves. He loves to do that stuff with us. So anyway, he's great. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's not my Just a Bit Outside. Everybody's kids have birthdays. That's not exceptional. What is exceptional? My kid is exceptional. Just that the fact that he has a birthday isn't. What is exceptional is Kansas City barbecue. Okay. And I wanted to take a minute.
That's a hot take.
To just an appreciation here. Okay. Do not take Kansas City barbecue for granted, Kansas City. Okay. For those of you who live in or around the area. Mark and I have lived in other places that do not have this type of thing. And
go eat the barbecue in Charlottesville, Virginia, if you can find any. It's awful.
Yeah. The only other state I've ever lived in was Iowa, and it sucked there too. But the great thing is, although you can get a damn good pork chop in Iowa, I will tell you that. Although the reason I put this on here is because you and I went to Meet Mitch the other day, and I had never been to Meet Mitch. Okay. Oh my God. They're not paying me to say this or anything. I'll take money if they want to give it. But that was fantastic. And then I ate the leftovers I got the next day because I spent an insane amount of money.
That was a wise decision, though, to go ahead and get enough food to have leftovers. That was great.
Oh, it was. Yeah. So I got enough food. It might be, did I tell you this? It might be the single most amount of money I've ever spent on lunch.
Oh, yeah. That might be the case. Yeah.
And so it was a little expensive, but oh my gosh, I ate it. It was so good that day. And then I heated it up the next day. It might have been better. It was so good. And then, you just go down the list. There's a million great barbecue places in this town, and we are insanely lucky to have all of them. Texted a friend of ours about a thing that we're doing next weekend. Mark's going to be there too. I said, hey man, where do you want to eat afterward? Q39. Yes. Great idea.
I already know what I'm getting.
I already know what I'm getting. It's going to be fantastic. So yeah, really love your barbecue scene, Kansas City, because it is so damn good.
Yes, love going at. Mike and I got that lunch the other day when all schools were closed and stuff because of snow and stuff. So that was wonderful. Yeah, love Kansas City barbecue. I'm actually talking about something food related too. So after you're done barbecue, eating that Kansas City barbecue, maybe you could do something like this. Lately, so many of you may know that my partner is a huge fan of like cooking and food. I think I've talked about this on the show before. As a result, she subscribes to this magazine called Bon Appetit. It's like a fancy food magazine. They do a thing for this magazine called Bake Club, which is like a monthly baking thing where everybody bakes the same recipe that they put out in the magazine or wherever it comes from. And so my partner has wanted to do this year. And so we've been doing this thing called Bake Club. We just did it tonight, like literally right before I came on here to record. I finished making the thing that we made for this month, February, which is, what's it called? Tiramisu cheesecake. Like all of these recipes are like very elaborate. And normally I'm not a cooking guy. I don't like to cook. I hate cooking. I'm not a fan of it, but it's something fun that we do together. And like she'll put on music and she loves it and gets so much joy out of it. And then we do all the crazy stuff that happens when you're baking. Like she starts the little hand mixer thing in the bowl and everything goes like everywhere, like, and so, all the fun stuff that happens when you're baking, we do together, and it's a lot of fun. And then if you do it well, which we don't always do it well, sometimes we do it poorly, but if we do it well, you get this delicious thing to eat that's like 1,000 calories per bite, because
that's what I was going to say. Go eat your Kansas City barbecue and then eat some cake, and then you can be dead before you go to bed.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out all these fancy recipes only taste good because they have a ton of sugar and butter and all this other stuff that's terrible for you. And so we ate we made this chocolate cake a while back. It was like this dark chocolate cake that had like olive oil. It was like an olive oil dark chocolate cake or something like that. It was gorgeous looking and delicious, but I swear it must have been like 800 calories a slice because, it was so too good to not, I saw what went into it. It was a lot of sugar. It was a lot of olive oil. It was a lot of other stuff. And I'm like, but it's just a fun thing to do. If you're like, oh man, me and my partner, me and my wife, whatever, husband, we need something to do together. I highly recommend something like this. Like pick a specific recipe that seems like interesting or fun to you and have a night where you just bake together and listen to music and that sort of thing. It can be a lot of fun. Anyway, that's all we have for you this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry we didn't get the Eric Oxer West USA Realty ad in today. I forgot to put it in. That's my bad, Ox, if you're listening. We'll put it in for next week. Thank you so much for joining us here on Royals Weekly, presented by Bet Online. Please join us again next week. We're back to weekly episodes. Until then, be good to each other.
And go Royals.